It's Ashley from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and I know that Saturdays are usually for Aria Temps, but don't worry, we will have an episode of Aria Temps sometime this week, so you might get 2 Aria Temps in 1 week. But for now, let's get into this video. So I can't believe it, but it's already the end of wedding season. And this wedding season was a little bit strange because there wasn't that many weddings going on, so the cakes were a lot smaller and a lot more simple. But I'm glad that we are ending it off with a little bit of a glamorous bang here. So this rustic wedding cake look is super in right now, and I really love the muted colors that we use in this. As usual, I am leveling all my cakes today, and I'm filling this particular 6-inch with some cream cheese espresso frosting. And if you've watched my channel before, you know how I feel about cream cheese, but I really feel like it does go well with the espresso, so I made a little exception. Tiered buttercream cakes can feel a little bit intimidating, but I'm going to show you some tips today that will really help make sure that it's super stabilized for a wedding. So what I'm doing is after I crumb coated this cake, I let it go in the fridge overnight. This is key. So if you don't want any issues with crumbling or toppling, make sure that you put it in the fridge overnight. Then you're going to coat it once more with the buttercream. Now, because we're going for a more rustic look here, according to the picture that was given to me, I'm really not being too strict about having the smoothest buttercream. In the photo, it was a little bit liney and had little spatula marks. So what I'm doing is I'm taking some really muted pink and brushing it along the sides of that buttercream. One thing you'll notice that I'm doing with this particular style as well is once I get that top super smooth, I'm leaving those edges jagged at the top. I am not taking my spatula and smoothing out that buttercream. The whole look of this is to have those jagged buttercream sides. Part of the finesse of this cake heavily relies on how you apply the buttercream. So it's super important that you direct a little bit more buttercream at the top edge of this cake. That way when you do your swipe around, you get that nice little jagged edge. One thing I do recommend is that if you're just starting out making wedding cakes, that you use silver or gold leaf. It just takes your cake to the next level with little effort. One thing you do have to know about handling gold leaf though is that it can fold on itself and it sticks to literally everything. So you'll notice that I'm actually using chopsticks here to apply this to the buttercream. And I didn't do anything special to the buttercream. That buttercream was sitting in the fridge after a while, so it had crusted over already as well. This is probably the scariest part of any tutorial. Now, I have shown you how to make a buttercream naked cake in the past, but that is a lot easier to stack because things are a lot messier. This one's a little bit more perfect. So what you saw me do there was take a perfectly cut 6-inch board, which is the size of my top cake, and I traced around. Now I am digging out that little layer just so that my board can sit flush. The reason I'm doing this is because I don't want things kind of rocking on top of the cake. I want it to just sit very nicely inside of that cake, as I'm not going to be putting any other ribbon or anything to cover. You might wonder why I'm applying more buttercream when I just took some buttercream away. It's fully just so that that cake board is going to stick. Now I'm using some bubble tea straws as supports. Put in as many as you would like. It doesn't matter if you put too many, but it does matter if you don't put enough. And make sure those bubble tea straws are sticking out just a little bit so that your cake is actually supported on those and not on top of the cake. You'll notice that I made 2 holes, one for the center dowel and one for another dowel. The reason that I use 2 types of sticks is because that center dowel does not have a point. The smaller dowel that's thinner has a point to it, so it's actually stabbed right into the board. So I know for sure that nothing is going to move around here. Now you'll notice that was a scary part too, where I dropped the cake down. And did I get it perfect? No, but I got it close enough. And now I'm using some buttercream to cover up any edge that might show just a little bit. You saw how much I had to handle the cake with my hands. This is also why we keep it in the fridge after it's been coated in the buttercream for a long time after that. I gave it about 30 minutes, but if you're just starting out with cakes, I suggest an hour minimum. That way you won't have to deal too much with things melting on your hands. You'll also notice that I did not apply any gold leaf to the top tier until I had stacked it. This is because that gold leaf helps cover up any imperfections that my hands left behind. I would do the same thing if I was adding fondant details to this, like polka dots, for example. I'm going to be adding a very small amount of fondant to my cake, and you'll notice here that I'm not using bright white fondant. I'm using kind of an ivory-ish fondant that I made myself. The reason is because if I used bright white, it probably wouldn't go as well with the cake, since the cake itself has kind of that pinky tone running through the front, and it's also not a pure white. So what I did there was I cut out some super thin fondant with that special cutter, and now I'm just using my balling tool to make those leaves a little bit more realistic. You'll notice that I didn't have to add any cornstarch or shortening or anything to my fondant. It's because I'm mostly working on my mat, and there was a lot of cornstarch added to this when I previously used this fondant, so I'm not going to add any more. Working with fondant is all about knowing what texture is going to work for you. You're also going to notice I'm not using any adhesive either. Things are just sticking together when I use the warmth of my hand to pinch things together. The magic of a realistic fondant rose that's easy is really all in the petals and all in the way that you twist things around. You could twist it in a different direction and it might not turn out looking as right, so it does matter how you place those petals. I also always make it a point to make sure that the petals go higher and higher as we get more towards the outside of the rose. That makes it look more realistic. Now, whenever you're working with a fondant rose that hasn't fully dried, there are things that you have to do in order to adhere it to the cake. Now, again, I don't have to use an adhesive because the buttercream is already sticky enough. So in this instance, it is important to use some sort of stick or cake tool to help you apply it, because your fingers will most likely crush some of that wonderful detail that you've put in there. You'll notice that I added some fondant leaves there, and I did that with one of those cookie cutters that has kind of the veins in it already for you, so you don't have to add any further detail. Now I'm going in with some gold luster dust mixed with some vodka, and I am painting the edges of the rose. Now it's time to talk about pricing of this cake. So anytime you have a wedding cake that is 2 tiers, I always base price it at $200. No matter what is going on with it, it's going to be $200. This helps cover the fee of how hard it is to really stack a cake. You saw there it wasn't just as easy as stacking one cake on top of another. There's a lot of supports that go in there as well. Gold leaf is not cheap, and oftentimes you have to actually order it online. And we used quite a bit here, so I would be charging $30 for that gold leaf. Being able to make fondant florals is a very specialized skill, so I would be charging $35 for fondant florals. This particular cake had buttercream coverage, but it was very specific buttercream coverage in the picture with that muted pink. So this would be an additional $30 charge. Remember that $200 base price really only would include a naked cake version. And finally, all of that gold painting and that little plaque there that is very specialized would be an additional $20. This would bring the grand total to $315 Canadian. Now, I'm well aware that I live in a very expensive part of Canada, and a lot of my viewers don't live in Canada. So a good tip for you is, if you're still working on pricing things, to go visit your local bakeries and see how much they charge for these types of things. And know that there will always be a little bit of discrepancy. Sometimes I ask my friend who owns a bakery here how much she would charge for a cake, and sometimes it can be a difference of $50 to $100. Sometimes she would charge more, sometimes I would charge more. So there is no perfect science to pricing your cakes. But I do think a general guided outline is a great place to start, especially if you're just starting out selling your home baked goods. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe so you can be part of the Sweetie fam. Right now, I'm uploading daily, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, be sure to comment, request, or ask a question. I love hearing from you guys. Bye!